Welcome to the Health Ranger Report here on Brighteon.tv. I am Mike Adams, the founder of Brighteon, and today we have a really special guest for you. He was a contributor to a book called Operation Mind Control, and he knows a lot about a lot of subjects of how we're being enslaved by the globalists. He's also a real expert in the interactions and the politics and the finance behind cold fusion. So we're going to ask him about these subjects. And Omicron. Is Omicron some kind of a trigger word for people to go crazy and start carrying out acts of violence like we have suddenly seen since the word Omicron appeared on the scene? So that's what we're going to talk about today with James Martinez. When we come back right after this break here on Brighteon.tv, we'll have that conversation and we will find out how deep the rabbit hole goes. So take your red pill, stay tuned. We'll be right back after this break right here on Brighteon.tv. All right, welcome back, folks. Mike Adams here, joined by James Martinez. Now, he is protecting his visual identity, so we're not going to see, his video feed, but he joins us by audio. James, are you there?
I'm here. Thanks for having me.
Okay, fantastic, James. So, as you heard in the intro, I mentioned a little teaser about what you're going to talk about. You know a lot about the mind control systems. You contributed to the second edition of that book. I mentioned Operation Mind Control. Just jump right into it, because you're suggesting that Omicron is a trigger word. And since then, and I'll let you speak, I'm sorry to take up so much time, but since then we saw somebody take over a school bus and ram a bunch of cars. That happened just yesterday. We saw a guy with a shotgun under his chin in front of the UN building in New York City. We saw this mass shooting in this I think it was a Michigan school, or this 15-year-old kid shot up a bunch of people. Is this a sign of the Omicron trigger? What's your take?
Well, I had to take a whole second look at the whole situation with that word. I mean, what I've been doing and why I called you, what this came up is I was going to, and I almost finished it now, done a complete audio book of Operation Mind Control Volume 2. And when I was going through all the passages, I was having tremendous flashbacks because I was involved with the publication of it and contributed to it, because in the first book, Operation Mind Control, that was done to prove that it exists and was operational, hence the word operational mind control. Walter was like my best friend and colleague. I knew him right to the end.
He's the author, the primary author.
He's the author. Yeah.
What's his full name?
Walter Boart, Brwart.
Boart. Okay. And is this a book that people can get like on Amazon, or you have to get a super secret place?
The original, believe it or not, I didn't even know it got reprinted and now it's being sold on Amazon. Okay. I had no idea. I only found out about 6 months ago. The researcher's edition, the special one, the actual book itself, we only printed 500 copies of that. And now most of it is free online, except the audio part. I've just finished up, just about getting done with that. But
now, when you say getting done with it, I mean listening to it or recording it, or what?
Recording it.
Recording it. So are you going to put out an audio version that people can listen to? Yes.
Yeah, it's out. I mean, most of the chapters are out and being distributed for free on Spotify, and I have links for it and so forth. And I made a long decision and thought about it, and I talked to lots of people I know behind the scenes about doing this and coming out and affiliating myself with this, because originally, way back when I was involved with the publication of this, we were in an ongoing investigation of all the behavioral software associated with mind control, how it worked, who knew about it, what was going on. And so when I was recording this specific chapter that had to do with this, it's a chapter called Dangerous Free Thinking. And I remember being invited on the phone and in person to meetings with psychologists, some of the best in the country at that time in the early 90s. We were all invited to a meeting because when I first met Walter Boart a long time ago, the reason I got involved with this work and contributed to the second volume was because I found out about the alien abductions were being faked. And it was a parallel program being run where they were overlaying it with satanic ritual abuse. And that was in the early 90s. And
Okay,
a lot of key people knew that.
Hold on a second, James. You're already getting deep in the rabbit hole here. We got a lot to go into, but first, let me just ask you. I know people listening to this interview are going to want to hear the book. So, can you post this on Brighteon.com as?
I'll give you all of it. I'll give you all of it. I'll send you all the archives, everything you want. It's for everybody, because of the discovery I just found out. I mean, I'm glad I did it now, because what I just found out, I couldn't sleep that night when I saw what I read and remembered.
Okay.
The transcript.
So let's jump into that. But just to get back to what you said, you were saying that you were aware of a group that was faking alien abductions in order to be a cover story for ritualistic child abuse. Now, in the context of the Ghislaine Maxwell trial and the Epstein being suicided and so on, suddenly this makes a lot of sense to a lot of people, where it might have been a totally fringy topic 20 years ago. It's not anymore. So go ahead.
Absolutely correct. Because when we knew back then, the world was a completely different place. The internet was just getting started. It was communications were different. Everything was different. So yes, the Maxwell trial is the mother lode in the trial and case of the century, maybe the millennium.
Well, that's why they're trying to cover it up. I mean,
absolutely. Yeah.
And it looks like nothing is going to come out of it, because they're going to, I mean, look at the judge and the prosecutor and the investigators. They're all controlled by the deep state. So why should we expect any truth to come out of that trial at all, by the way?
Precisely. And ironically, the transcript, which I'm going to read a piece from, and the following end chapter was the reason why none of this was going to come out. Because when I was on the Freedom of Thought Foundation, there were three things that were our main purpose in educating the public about. One was repealing the National Security Act. The reason nobody's going to hear anything about this trial is because of that. And they're not going to. Everybody knows that. That was the first thing. The second thing was the exposure of the behavioral software that was embedded into the United States post-World War II, into cults and ritualistic groups, Luciferian, Satanists, that whole thing. And finally, the third thing, which I was involved, which you kind of know me from, was the deployment of advanced technology to decentralize it, hence, i.e. cold fusion, LANR. So the final chapter of the book is called Repealing Thought, and it's about repealing the National Security Act. That's how they've gotten away with this. That's why when that apparatus was set up in 1947, that ended America. That ended. Okay. So none of these presidents can do anything. They're losers. I've never, ever supported anything and supported any of these people because of the fact they won't repeal that. Now, some are better than others, and I don't hate Trump. I don't hate any of them, because they're all trapped in a system that was totally taken down in 1947 when they did it. According to us, what we discovered, and Walter talked to Fletcher Prouty about this. They all knew. They knew, but in the early 90s, nobody would listen. They weren't prepared to deal with this.
James, just a second. So to back you up, we've just seen, I think even BuzzFeed News did a deep dive into the CIA's cover-up of the pedophiles in the CIA. So or the DOJ covered up the pedophiles in the CIA. So that's been breaking big over the last couple of days, where there's all this child porn on the computers of the CIA operatives on government computers. They were all busted. They were caught trying to meet children for encounters or for trafficking or what have you. And the government they pulled the card, like you just said, national security. And then they covered it all up, and nothing ever happened to those people. So there is, I mean, objectively, there is a pedophile network in the intelligence community, deep inside the deep state. It does exist. It has been confirmed, and they cover up their crimes. So I'm just backing you up there, James, because all that's come out just this week.
Right. That's totally 100% true. So to get to the fulcrum of this, I was recording the last two chapters. The second to last chapter is a transcript that we were allowed to take when we were meeting with shrinks and psychologists, some of the top people in the country at that time. And they were all terrified about talking to this. Some of them already had death threats. Some of them were afraid that their patients that they were treating would kill them. Because the way they set this up, they've got booby traps inside the behavioral software they install when they're in program, doing all their program, which is this is the perfection of behavior modification that started in World War II. And we knew all about this at the beginning.
So wait a second. So you're saying there's a system that's installing behavioral software in the minds of the American people. How is this getting installed? I mean, is it through television, movies? You said cults. Like,
yes, because we cover in the book how the cult network, and CIA is very interested in cults because they're interested in behavior cohesion and how groups stay together and how that's maintained for group control, for political purposes. And it's a great way to test out various drugs, hypnosis, and so forth, which had been going on in cults all over the United States, including the Satanists and all the things that people are hearing about. That had been going on for a long, long, long time. And when we were meeting with the shrinks way back when, and the psychologists, they were terrified about talking about it. They're worried about putting their names against it. People may recall long ago when Bud Hopkins came out and started talking about all these abduction cases. And I knew him, and I knew John Mack, and I knew these guys in the beginning. And John Mack was a psychiatrist. So he did hear the whole story.
Well, and what about that group? There was a group in D.C., it was like from the 80s or 90s. It was a cult child trafficking group, and it got exposed, but then totally covered up under national. What was the name of that group?
That one you're probably thinking about is from the Franklin cover-up around that time. Is that what you think?
Okay, yeah, I'm not that familiar with it, but I know there was a group that was all in D.C. It was all child trafficking.
I think you're talking about the Franklin cover-up, because I spoke to Venatchi, and all of us found out what the hell was going on from some of these people that were in it and surviving it that we could get to, because they don't just sit down and tell you, this is what's happening, A, B, C, D. You got to get in and access the original host that's in charge of that personality to even get anywhere near any of that stuff at all. They've set up booby traps so that when psychologists and shrinks go in and try and access all these alters, they have to find out who they are, what relationship they have to each other, who's in charge.
When you say booby traps, I'm sorry to keep interrupting you, but you mean like psychological booby traps? Like if a psychologist is trying to pry into the psyche of a person's mind, it will trigger some kind of psychological booby trap? Is that what you're saying?
That's correct. Yeah, they put that in there. They put that in there into these various groups. They put suicide is one thing. If people go back and they look at the original Bourne Identity movie that came out regarding Jason Bourne, there's a scene in there where he gets in a fight in this apartment. And when the opponent is losing the fight, he jumps out the window and commits suicide.
Oh, yeah. I know that fight scene. That's where Jason Bourne jabs him in the hand with a pen, by the way.
Yeah. And that programming is very serious, specific, and designed inside. That's one of the things that we were discovering way back when. But so when I was recording the transcript between the psychologists and so forth, we had to sign paperwork and get NDAs. People were worried this was going to end their careers. And then what happened is when I'm reading the transcripts, that they're comparing information from psychologists in California, Florida, all over the place. And they're finding similar patterns in the language that are coming up in the programming way back then. And they're freaked out because they're realizing this is a systematic, planned, there's people behind this, and there's a driving engine that's inserting all of this into these children and middle-aged people all over America.
So this is so spooky, because I was on with Alex Jones a few days ago, and I was saying that it's like the whole world has been MK Ultra'd because of the fear campaign of the media. But that was a metaphor when I said it. You're saying it's actually maybe not the whole world, but a lot of the population has been, in effect,
definitely the United States. I know we had psychologists in Europe that they had mirrored, saying some of the key words were also in patients of theirs. And
so get us to the Omicron then, because you were saying in our pre interview conversation, you were saying that Omicron, you believe, is a trigger word.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to read verbatim.
Okay.
From the book where this shows up.
And what year was this book first published?
This came out later in 2002, and we were deciding in the early 90s, because we're looking at all the research post the original book, whether or not we were even going to print this stuff.
Okay.
We were concerned about it.
Go ahead and read it.
Okay. Now, remember, this is in the middle of a conversation with a bunch of people talking to each other and comparing notes. And I'll explain anything that's kind of vague here. This is a direct quote. I'd recommend that if you get the entire Greek alphabet, if you have verified that some of this stuff is present and they have given you some of the right answers about what some of this material is, I can't underline enough. Do not lead them. He's referring to the patients. They want the patients to do the talking. They don't want to insert any information into them. Let them answer on their own. I would take your entire Greek alphabet and with ideomotor signals, go through the alphabet and say, is there any programming inside associated with epsilon or omicron? And go on through. There may be some systematic procedure with some of the other letters. I found, for example, in one case, that zeta has to do with the production of snuff films that one person was involved with. With another person, omicron had to do with their linkage and associations with drug smuggling and with the mafia and with big business and government leaders.
Whoa. Well, I mean, that's like big pharma corruption.
Correct.
And government protecting pharma. And frankly, the vaccines being moved around without authorization is a kind of drug smuggling too. I mean, that's some spooky stuff.
Yeah. So when I was recording that late at night, I stopped right in my tracks. I stopped everything and I went, oh my God, there it is right there. That word, you can, when you're inserting and mapping a reality into a child or an older person, words take on different meanings, and you can attach neuroassociative conditioning to that word, put it in the unconscious and let it ferment there. And then when comes time to utilize that word, it comes out as command. That's a command. It's not the name of a virus. It's a command. That's what it is.
When this new variant was first discovered, this is something that I found extremely odd. Do you recall, James, in the first day or two, they called it the new variant, NU. And then they changed the name. They changed it to Omicron. Do you recall that?
No, I did not notice that.
I recorded my first podcast on this, even has the title of the new variant, because that's what was being reported out of South Africa. That was in the press. I had to go back and change the title to add the word Omicron in parentheses. You can go back on my podcast, and we wrote about it as the new, NU. And in fact, some people were doing titles like New World Order, but spelled NU because it's the new variant. Mm-hmm. So they changed it to Omicron.
Mm-hmm.
Like they chose that word.
It doesn't surprise me, because it's a key word that was being put in these young children, middle-aged adults, and the programmers. So what they did is they had initial overlay programming that started probably, and I'm theorizing here based upon all the language, and because New World Order as a language pattern was also inserted in these people in the early 90s. Now, when I showed up, I was just showing how they were faking these abductions. Then I was found out, okay, when they're faking these abductions and they're using ritual abuse as cover to run a parallel program while they're controlling the UFO memes out there in the early 90s, they're inserting this language in to essentially create an underslave class of robotic workers that will carry out their dirty deeds, while the people that finance it at the very, very top and the people that are involved in the case with Maxwell, this is the whole thing right here. This is the most important thing, is the international banking cartel communities, which finance all this stuff, and it goes down the chain of command. Sex is a national security issue because of the way it's been blackmailed and inserted into this generation of people that has been going on for so long. So you've got a underclass of people that are responding to this word. That's my intuitive feeling after looking at all the evidence and everything that I just read from this as I was recording this.
Well, okay, let me just insert something here, and I can tell we're going to run out of time, but after this interview today, I'm doing another interview with an individual who is going to tell me that they have evidence that Jeffrey Epstein is linked to the creation of Bitcoin by the central bankers. So you just said central bankers and high finance people who are all involved in these trafficking rings and blackmail. like pedo blackmail traps. That's what Epstein was doing.
Yeah.
But what if he's also behind some of the fronts, in crypto to get people into eventually like a central bank digital wallet by getting them used to it at first, It
wouldn't surprise me because they always test technologies and get the public to willingly allow themselves to be tested with crypto. And that's ironic to me that you'd say that, because I know the big Bitcoin court case is going on in Florida right now. I know because those people are contacting me, and the gentleman supposedly by the name of Craig Wright, who's the real original Bitcoin creator, is in a huge loss. Nobody even knows that's even going on or even understands it for that matter.
No, but
and he doesn't even know that, but he may, because I saw him in an interview say that he had spent some of his money assisting the therapy of child trafficking because he's from Australia.
Really?
That's new news that you just told me right there. I didn't know that.
Well, I haven't even told the public yet. I mean, this is the first time that I've mentioned it on camera. Because I'm about to do that interview and we're going to learn more and kind of see where that rabbit hole goes. But what we're all finding out is that Epstein was an intelligence community protected asset, and his job was to compromise all the world's most powerful people and then leverage them to carry out the aims of the globalists, right? Would you agree with that overview?
Yeah. Yep.
So he had his fingers in everything. I mean, I don't mean that literally. I mean, metaphorically, into banking and finance and mind control, everything imaginable. No wonder they suicided him, right?
Yeah, they've built essentially behavioral engineered an army in the United States, starting from we found it. So we discovered it in the early 90s. And when we were talking to psychologists and shrinks and psychiatrists, we were all just making jokes about the DSM-5 at that point, because we knew it was a legislation for consciousness, and we knew the whole thing was infested with all this occult, sexual, ritualized behavioral programming inside of it.
That's the for people listening. That's the psychiatric diagnostics manual used by psychiatrists to prescribe or to diagnose people with conditions and then prescribe mind-altering drugs.
You got it. Look, I don't want to poo-poo the mental health profession because there's a lot of good people in there, but it's been totally corrupted.
Yeah.
And it's in it. And the money chain between, I met with people, big finance people in Utah a long time ago, and they wanted to hear me say directly to their face, what is international banking? And I said, it's not about money. It's about child trafficking.
Wow.
That's a form of currency. That's what it is.
Holy crap.
The movement of money and information between A and B. Behind it, to even get into that position, you have to be participating in this type of activity. And they're using it and passing it along, and you can compromise anybody, even if you're not abusing children. If you take a photograph with somebody that is, that's going to be used against you too. I mean, it's a really dirty business. I mean, Walter Boart told me, he says, do not make a career out of this stuff, because if you get around it, they'll blackmail you too.
Yeah, right. No, I've actually heard stories of that happening from people who are prominent in the Liberty community. But look, we're going to wrap up this segment here on Brighteon.tv. But folks, you got to watch the extended version of this conversation. We're going to continue with James Martinez in the extended interview on Brighteon.com. It'll be on my channel, HR Report, Brighteon.com. But thank you for joining us today so far. We've only just begun digging into this. Oh my goodness. I'm Mike Adams here, founder of Brighteon.tv. Take care. So when these people who have been programmed with the word Omicron, when they hear this trigger word, based on what you know, what do you suppose that they've been programmed to do behaviorally when this is triggered?
False flag attacks, murder, drug smuggling, with self-destruction in there. So they'll suicide out or get themselves killed, and that's okay with the host. When I say the word host, I'm talking about the original spirit. Like if I was talking about Mike Adams' host, the identity and spirit inside of you before you were called Mike Adams. That's the host.
Don't use my name in any. That's too creepy. Use like John Doe or something. I mean, my host is God, right? That's it. It's me and God created me, and I'm here trying to stop all this damn evil out there. But so please don't even invoke my name with that. But you're talking about extreme evil here. You're talking about, I mean, are you actually talking about demonic entities or just evil humans?
Well, when I spoke to Walter about it, this is the highest form of spiritual warfare, because the family, the Godhead of creation, are under attack. And the part of the reason, I've heard Alex Jones talk about his conversations with Ted Gunderson, and I can confirm that is 100% correct.
Oh yeah.
I talked to Ted over the phone with all these people a long time ago. And if there's one thing that I did notice amongst all of them, is that when this type of knowledge is bestowed upon somebody and they see it in the flesh, it changes them forever. That knowledge and acknowledgement of that. So Gunderson, Prouty, Boart, Colonel Tom Bearden, psychologists, shrinks that we knew, all that people in the mental health profession, they knew that this was the biblical attack against the genetic code of future humans. So that's he wouldn't say that, and we were afraid to say that back then. But that's what we concluded.
Well, then let me ask you how this ties in to the mRNA vaccines, because now Fauci is becoming sort of a medical pedophile, trying to insert this gene-altering software, right, operating system, into the bodies of children. I mean, surely this is just an extension of that.
Oh, no,
paradigm.
It's an absolute extension, because the end goals we knew were to capture the brain. The battlefield of the 21st century is the brain and the body, but primarily the brain. And if you can capture the brain and get it to willingly move into a position to take foreign machinery and put it into your body, and then get the original host of that identity to go along with it. Now, I've called you in the past, and I get calls from people all over the world, and I hear the same pattern over and over again. And this is, my best friend, I've known for 30 years, she said that they would never, ever, ever do this, and they were completely against it, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then I get a call, and they tell me they just did it.
Taking the vax, you mean?
Yeah, they get injected. Oh. They get injected with this thing, and they don't even know why they did it. Originally, they were completely, totally against it, and they knew what it was doing to people, yet they end up doing it. And then when you ask, well, what'd you do that for? They don't know why. There's a reason for that. That's the deep embedded program into the language patterns over a long period of time, the conflict between authority and truth, and understanding what that is. You're telling the truth, and that affects authority figures everywhere. And their whole system is crumbling down. Now, I noticed this going on for months, and I was shaking my head, and I said, yeah, the contribution of electronics, Wi-Fi, and language, and the general emotional detachment of and desensitized nature of Americans, when they do not respond, when their children are under attack, that was designed, in my opinion.
Well, what about, a lot of people talk about mind control frequencies that are in television programming. And one of the ways, see, I do not watch TV ever. I don't have a TV. I mean, I have a display, where I can watch DVDs of old movies and things like that. But I don't watch any broadcast television, haven't for decades. But people who do seem to be suckers for what they're commanded to do. Is there some kind of exotic technology involved in that, embedded in the signal?
I believe so, because after reviewing and reading all the data as a kind of refresher course of all the stuff that we were doing, a lot of people that are in psychiatric hospitals were experiments when they were using certain types of technologies to create a secondary internal dialogue. So the voice that's in your head, and people have a voice in their head, and it instructs them, and it tells them, and it suggests them, is to stick an alternate one in there, and then see if that was successful at putting instructions with the host inside the person. And they achieved that. They achieved it many times. In fact, survivors of it came out and they told us about it. And they'd been held up in office buildings, being checked out by psychiatrists and given drugs, and they were considered schizophrenics, when really it was a weapon that was designed to put voices in their head, and
Wow.
it was tested a long time ago. We put it in the book.
Well, I mean, just a word to the wise. If the voice in your head sounds like Fauci, you should probably ignore it. You know, right? or it's telling you to do crazy, insane things. But what does this mean in terms of where all this is going? Because right now it seems like the globalists are trying to use all of this programming to trigger people to commit vaccine suicide as a depopulation weapon. Yeah, go ahead.
The suicide thing is part of the programming. And this transcript, because I didn't want to read the whole thing and people can listen to it, there's within the behavioral software, there's self-destruct buttons. Like when I was talking about that scene from the Born Supremacy or the Born Identity movie, the self-destruction thing, kill yourself. That's standardized in the whole thing. So as I've been watching over the months of this whole thing, people just willingly lining up, all of this stuff is coming to my head and said they have cohesively joined this with 5G and our phone systems. That's what I think, because we've got a desensitized, non-reactionary public in the United States. I mean, you notice everybody else in the world around the streets, millions and millions and millions. And we're here watching Big Top Pee-wee, NFL, scum on TV, stupid movies, and we're under complete attack and we're not even responding.
There's something, right. No, it's completely insane. And there's like demonic programming on Netflix for children, you know, things like that. But you just triggered a thought, speaking of triggering, because I interviewed Wilkins. I think his name is Brian Wilkins from the COVID blog. And he was talking about the personality changes that he's documented in people after they took the first vaccine shots. So there's something in the shots that's literally kind of taking over people's personalities. And before you answer that, James, think about doctors in the hospitals now. They are putting patients on ventilators. They're murdering patients. They're committing homicide calmly when they know the ventilators have like an 85% death rate, and they're just murdering people. And that's entirely consistent with what you're saying, as if they're almost, you know, robotically controlled automatons. It's no longer the person it used to be inside. It's controlled. Does that make sense?
There's non-empathy. My
Right.
uncle was murdered last Christmas, and he told the hospital, do not put me on a ventilator. He went out. Of course, they put him on a ventilator. He's dead 24 hours later. I got the call on Christmas Day. So I know that's precisely what you're talking about. There's in the United States, I mean, my feeling is that empathy, and they've desensitized most of the public with violence and so forth long before. So when, you know, I hear the stories in Los Angeles when there's somebody laying dead in the street, nobody even responds. They just drive right by.
Or they take out their phones and they film it, and that, you know, just to get likes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that feeling and emotion of connectivity to your fellow person, that's been installed over a long period of time by desensitizing to violence, which is why, you know, I occasionally switch on the television and there's nothing pro-human on television at all. All the advertisements are garbage. Nothing. It's a joke. I mean, I don't watch it, but it's offensive to me to turn it on now. I don't even bother doing it anymore. Because I can see what they're doing.
Well, that brings up the question, how do you think people can protect themselves from this psychic assault, I guess you might call it? You know,
one of the things, cut off all your communications with any corporate media, shut off your phones, don't use them go on a media fast. Go on a media fast into nature. I've prescribed that to people all the time. So at least when you go on the media fast, you'll come back, you'll feel different, then you'll have contrast. And when you have contrast, you'll be able to feel the difference between a normal physiological response in biology and nature, and where you're inside the culture, which is all electrocuted, because this is an invisible war. There's a section in Operation Mind Control, and I recorded it. This was a separate part that he put out at the very end called The Invisible War. And then, because it is invisible, it's because people cannot see all this sea of information and electronic disturbance, which is affecting our biology and everything. And this is what's happened inside with all these people that have been programmed with these language patterns and so forth to respond with agitation and anger and carry out what is going to be, hopefully not, the false flag attacks, which will be blamed on the good guys, of course.
Well, let me ask you this question. Do you believe that currently sitting members of Congress have also been programmed?
Oh, for sure. For sure. Without a doubt.
I mean, some of them display fairly erratic behavior all the time. Though, like AOC, she seems bat bleep crazy every day.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't surprise, but it's hard to, some of the slickest MK Ultra people look like the most responsible, the smartest, and the slickest, but you're not seeing the real person because the host is compromised and there's an altar in there that's been set up and conditioned and designed to respond and designed to act and designed to have a pulse rate and a heart rate at a certain point and to be in a certain energetic state when it's before the public. Let's take an example. Barry Soetoro. I always bring that up because everybody knows that guy. That's Barack Obama. The real guy, nobody even knows about. And this is a small child that's been completely, totally traumatized, pair bonded with a transsexual as a child who was his maid. And then he was basically hijacked as a teenager and put into all sorts of programs that I know about because I know people that knew him when he was a young guy and in college. I mean, I only use that as an example because people know who that person is. But for people that are seeing people on television, they're in key authority positions, they've already been embedded with this word, Omicron. Now I know it because they generationally did this over a long period of time. And it's my theory, I don't know for sure, that if we found this many people in the early 90s that's already been put in, by the time they responded with those words and told their therapist this, that probably had been going on for 20 years.
So there could be another keyword coming. Before this Omicron variant, whatever you want to call it, nobody ever heard the word Omicron in normal conversation. So it would qualify as a really effective trigger word because, to be a good trigger word, obviously you don't want it to be heard in normal conversation. So, but now suddenly everybody's hearing this, but there may be, from what you're saying, there obviously may be other programs that are going to be triggered by other keywords, and this can be triggered by other, quote, variants, which, by the way, I think are complete fiction anyway. I think just making this up in the media, but this is the way they get the word.
Go for the mind. Go for the mind first. The body will follow it. Mind first, body follows second.
So we could literally be looking at kind of a hypnosis zombie apocalypse scenario, depending on what gets triggered next.
You just said it. That's what it is. Because the zombie apocalypse and all that underpinning of language has been put in the military and it's put into culture all over the place. And those zombies aren't just people that are going through a cognitive degrade from the injections that they're putting in their body. It's also from the previous programming that's been going on in cults and Luciferian groups and all these child cases, because it's not just the usage of the physical body. Some of them are used and harvested for some things, and some of them are used and put into the intelligence community and the military. And the military backed it. It's in the book.
Wow.
They sanctioned it.
Okay, so in the interest of time, I want to ask you about cold fusion. And as you referred to, LENR, low energy nuclear reactions. Now, and you're right, this is how I first became aware of your work, because I've long known that cold fusion is very real ever since Fleischmann and Pons back in 1989, University of Salt Lake City, University of Utah, Salt Lake City, I believe. Tell us, give us kind of the 50,000 foot view of cold fusion and where it's at right now.
It's total insanity. I've dealt with the labs. I know everybody involved. I've been involved for a very, very long time. There's a scientist named Rossi that's getting ready to do a public display of a generation of a light bulb using low energy nuclear reactions. This is one of the things in the Freedom of Thought Foundation, when it was set up, we had three things they were interested in: repealing the National Security Act and the deployment of low energy nuclear reactions, cold fusion, and the exposure of child trafficking and the behavioral software that was being inserted. So my aim was to see to it that this technology will put into culture and then examined. But here's the situation. We're getting told every single day that we're destroying the planet, blah, 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 blah. It's such a total, complete lie when we've had technology to fix all of this for so long. I'm sick and tired of having to explain it over and over and over and over and over again, because a lot of the military and the government, they know they have the technology that they fix everything. And this is part of it. But
yeah, the U.S. Navy has been running LENR experiments for like 20 years or something, right?
At least. They just had a meeting at ARPA with all the top people in the field. And they went there to beg if the U.S. government would put $10 million into this. And I was trying to get into it because I wanted to just witness all the nonsense that was being said and all the ass kissing that was going on for money. And they thought if the government would give them $10 million, they'd do a legitimate more research into LNR, even though they already have over Unity. And I was rejected from that meeting. They would not allow me to access any of that. But the conversations about this and LNR as a technology was put in the original Trump administration, and it was removed. It was removed right at the beginning. Right at the beginning. It was in the National Defense Authorization Act. They know they have this technology. And so those are the insides that know what that is.
So all this,
they can fix everything. They already know they can fix everything, but it's all politics now. And huge money people and government people that I know are all looking at this very, very quietly.
Well, it's about, I mean, the whole climate change narrative is obviously about enslaving humanity. That's it. And because there is no energy scarcity when you can turn heavy water, deuterium, into free energy, which already exists, as you're talking about. But most of the top, I mean, Russia has this tech, Japan has the tech, China has the tech, the US has the tech, at least those four countries, probably India has it as well. I mean, this is actually common technology, but it's being kept from the people, correct?
Yes, it should be your technology and mine and everybody else. Because the lecturing that's going on about saving the planet, I hear it every day and it makes me sick because I know it's a complete, total, utter lie. I took people recently inside those facilities. They wanted to see that it was real. And they talked to all the top engineers and guys, and they were there. And they go, yeah, it's real. The commercialization of that, getting into your hands, getting into everybody else's hands, that is where I put most of my focus and time is in dealing with that. Because ultimately, in order to get out of this gigantic mess that we're in, we have to completely decentralize and we have to return to the earth, return back to governing thyself in law first, because all our elected employees have completely, totally failed us. And I can say that because we've gotten into this position because they didn't have the guts and courage enough to come out and tell the public, engage this conversation. They never did it.
So just to be clear about the practical applications of LENR, this can happen on a tabletop, right? It can happen at a pretty small scale. You could, if this technology were, allowed to be distributed, you could have a self-recharging electric car, correct?
It's the end of all of the problems of scarcity. It's all the end.
You could heat buildings for free. And all the heat in the world would be essentially free. You would need no more coal-fired power plants. You wouldn't need nuclear power plants. You wouldn't need, natural gas even. You could do everything with electricity using just mass to energy conversion.
You got it. 100% true. It's
and
all
how
there right now.
I've looked at some plans and diagrams of some of the various contraptions that I think people have been using. Even the old Fleischmann and Pond stuff. It doesn't look that complicated. Like you could make one if you had the instructions.
Right.
Right?
That is correct. And I would tell you right now that after all the conversations I've had with people, and see, they're trying to bring the people that are involved are bringing in a disruptive technology which changes the rules of economy and scale and even language. And what they're trying to do, and their biggest problem is taking the language of yesterday and trying to include it with the new language of this. and then putting that into a form of economics. No, they don't. The government surely does not want you to understand that part, because we wouldn't have gotten to this position if you didn't have certain people that could control the money system. This changes the structure of money forever, which is why I got involved with it at the very beginning. It's not just cleaning up the planet. That's one thing. But I've always said we should make cleaning up the planet a business where people can contribute to doing that by using technologies like this. This is a part of the, quote, energy conversation that was a think tank in Washington, D.C. behind the scenes.
Well, I'm real glad you pointed this out, because you just connected a couple of things. The central bank in the U.S., the Fed, can only print money and use that for all the bribery and corruption and bailouts and everything because of the existence of the petrodollar, the globally recognized U.S. dollar as the petrodollar. If free energy is announced, I mean, even if some whistleblower just comes out and goes like full Project Veritas on this and releases the plans to James O'Keefe, let's say, the petrodollar's over, which means the central banks are over, which is great for humanity, but that's why they're fighting this, because they want to maintain control.
Yeah, it could have been out. The amount of money that's been given away by big tech companies that were for contributions to certain terrorist organizations that we know about. Because I know big tech companies that are involved with this, that know exactly what's going on, and they will not hand over money for this. I know, because I know people that are involved directly with it. They won't do it. And I just got into a conversation with one of the senior engineers in this industry about that. And the reason is because I brought it up. And this was new to me, because I don't probe and trying to get into big problematic people that are trillionaires for many reasons. But one of the reasons there's criticism is because people have not shown a public display of over unity. There's never been a public display of this device used where the public has been allowed to do that. And that's one gigantic criticism. And when I inquired about why that has not gone on, it's because the people and engineers and the Pentagon and everybody else, they don't want you involved.
Well, right. Everybody loses their minds. I mean, we need some kind of renegade maverick inventor to just open source the whole damn thing on a Friday, just stop trying to.
Completely agree, because this has gone on for way, way too long. And greed and having monopolies does not work in this industry. This is an announcement for everybody that's going to hear this, that I know, that are all the scientists in there, that are all like negotiating with their lawyers and talking to all the trillionaires now that have all their big plans. Greed, and that does not mix with this. Get over it.
The future of human civilization, in my view, is a decentralization of everything, of money, of government, of medicine, even decentralization of science. Excuse me. Fauci has controlled all the funding through the NIH, and that's why everybody has obeyed his command. And look what that's done to the world. Fauci is a mass murderer, killing millions of people right now around the world. So if we decentralize energy through this system, it sets the world free. And any inventor who could do this and just release it, that person would be the greatest person in history. And that's worth more than money, right? Isn't it?
You're absolutely 100% correct. And I agree absolutely. And that's Operation Mind Control was not just about showing how mind control worked. It was about reframing consciousness to a higher level, because ultimately Walter Bard, his main thing is he wanted to liberate the human spirit. That was his main goal.
Yeah.
I know how he went through the last phase of his life. I know everybody he was involved with, how it all came to be, the whole story. And he said, all of us agreed. Fletcher Prouty knew too. And he said, yeah, good luck with that, getting that out, because it's going to end everything. And that's why
it's the most disruptive technology ever.
Ever.
Right.
Ever. Yeah. That's why they're so upset about it. I mean, people don't realize this is a hidden piece of history that I will say right now, that many years ago, for those that remember, there was a gigantic public display with the American Indians at Standing Rock, where the big oil companies were coming to invade their land. But little does anybody know that same Indian, those Indians, the Lakota Sioux, were the first government sanctioned, in agreement, in accordance, asking for that energy. supporting that energy. In fact, some of their leaders are on tape in front of people at Congress. Wow. At DC. None of that footage came out. Nobody knows anything about it. All the media and everything that covered up and lied about everything. I mean, I haven't really gone public about any of that stuff yet because it hasn't been time to do so, but I'm glad I'm doing it here because you at least understand this because you've been way, way, way ahead of everybody on a lot of stuff.
Well, I mean, I want humanity to be free, and I'm tired of all these systems. And yeah, I know a lot more than I even let on publicly because, well, all of us do in independent media. There's a lot of stuff we can't yet report on, but we know what's happening. And frankly, it's time for humanity to break free from this slave grid. It's not just mind control, it's financial control, it's health control, biological control, it's everything.
Absolutely.
But James, we are seriously out of time here because I have this other interview coming up. So how about this? Let's wrap up this one today, right here. But let's plan to do kind of a mini documentary conversation just about cold fusion, where I'll interview you again and our editors can put in a lot of B-roll footage and article headlines and things like that. Let's do like an hour documentary on that. Are you up for that?
Totally up for it. And I'll get you footage that has not been seen by anybody. That was supposed to come out in a movie. A movie came out called End of the Line. It was the women of Standing Rock. The original footage of all the stuff having to do with cold fusion was cut out by two governments that didn't want that in. They sure as hell didn't want me talking about it. I'm in it, but everything I said was all taken out. It went to a bunch of
really?
film debuts. I didn't go to any of the premieres, but all the Indians know about it. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. I'll be happy to talk to you about it.
Okay. All right. Well, let's set up a time to do that because I think this is really crucial for humanity. And really all it takes is one guy who has this technology to just decide that he doesn't need to be a trillionaire. He just wants to save humanity. And that should be enough. And just release the damn thing. Release the plans. Have a PDF. Put it on Brighteon, 50 ways to make energy for free, right? Just step by step, just drill these holes, wind this copper, whatever it is. Just put it out there. Let everybody work on it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Go get some seawater and a centrifuge. I don't know. I mean, it doesn't sound that complicated to me. I do a lot of complicated stuff in my lab. This doesn't really sound that complex, frankly.
They would lead you to believe that. They don't want you to understand it because certain people have spent their whole lives getting to this point and they want payback. It's pretty simple.
Yeah, well, I get it. But you know what? You can't take it with you. Spiritual payback is what should count. You
said it right there. That's it. Right there. Precisely.
Your spiritual currency, that's what you end up with at the end of this whole simulation, whatever.
Yeah. I knew you totally understand. Exactly.
Yeah. That's why even prepping, I'm like, I'm buying food and bullets and stuff, but don't forget spiritual prepping, right? Because that's where it counts. All right, James, it's been a pleasure. Intriguing. We're deep in the rabbit hole. I'm sorry we have to cut it off, but we'll do this again soon.
Thank you so much. Take care. We'll talk soon.
All right, take care. And for those of you watching, feel free. You can repost this interview. You can take, snippets of it and just post those little 3-minute snippets or whatever you want. This is important stuff. This is the most important stuff. It's about global mind control, but also a technology to set humanity free. So get the word out, and we'll do this again. I'm Mike Adams. I'm the founder of Brighteon. And remember, I built Brighteon for moments like this. Everything is at stake. The future of human civilization is at stake. And we need your support at Brighteon.com. So thank you for all your support. God bless you all. And we'll talk again soon about this topic and many others. Take care. Survival Nutrition is our new free audiobook that you can download right now from survivalnutrition.com. In this nearly 8-hour audiobook, you will learn life-saving secrets of how to use food, nutrients, plant molecules, trace minerals, and chemical compounds to save your life, even in a total collapse scenario. I'm Mike Adams, the Health Ranger, and I'm the author of Survival Nutrition. I founded and run a multi-million-dollar food science laboratory, and I'm the author of the best-selling science book, Food Forensics. I'm also a prepper, a patriot, and a survivalist. I can teach you how to survive what's coming by growing your own food, medicine, and antibiotics that can help keep you healthy and alive even during the worst of times. At survivalnutrition.com, you'll be able to instantly download the full free audiobook as MP3 files. Keep a copy of all these files on your local hard drive and print out the full guide just in case we lose the power grid. survivalnutrition.com.